Just want to thank everybody once again for tuning in. This is Gather Project's What's Your Story? We are really fortunate to have Jason Fuchs here. Actually, did I pronounce is that how you pronounce your name? I should have asked you before.
It's 8 o'clock.
You pronounced it perfectly. It could get really ugly, and you nailed it.
No, that's great. So I'm particularly really, interested here. I mean, as an actor, writer, and producer, who's had significant success, and we have not had the chance to meet prior to this. So I'm really interested to hear more. But today I will be listening, and our team from Wesleyan will be handling the questions. Amanda and Miguel, students at Wesleyan, and Audrey, our leader from the Wesleyan chapter, will be taking questions from the audience. So as you all have questions, please go ahead and put them at the bottom of your screen. You can see if you click and type the Q&A section, you can type in questions. I don't know, Audrey, you wanted to say something about the group from Wesleyan and everything that you guys are doing?
Sure, thank you. So I'm Audrey, and I've been facilitating some of the meetings and things we've been doing at Wesleyan. Most notably, this has slowed down for a little bit, but we've been doing this thing called Gather Global, where we show movies from around the world and talk about them. And I've also been running a little screenwriting workshop targeted towards women and non-binary people. And I'm still trying to figure out another way to get kind of an all-inclusive screenwriting workshop going. But yeah, we're kind of running a bunch of different projects right now. And I'm really excited for us to get this opportunity to talk to you as well.
Well, thank you guys. I'm going to turn it over. And just as a reminder to everybody, if you're interested in other stuff, check out gatherproject.net. But for today, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda and Miguel and Audrey. And Jason, thanks again for doing this. Looking forward to hearing the questions and answers. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, Jason, thank you so much for coming. I'm so glad we get to speak to you today. It's such a privilege. So we just want to hear a bit about what made you get into entertainment. I know you were a child actor. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I got involved in entertainment at a very young age. I grew up in New York City. I'm an only child. I love movies. I was so obsessed with movies when I was, 2, 3, 4 years old that I actually at one point stopped speaking. Like I was so locked in on movies that my parents actually took me to a doctor who thought I had some kind of, disorder and just said, don't let them watch movies 24 hours a day. But I was just obsessed. And I would ask my parents, how could I get in the box? I want to be inside the box. And my parents eventually sort of translated that and realized, I was interested in acting. And I begged them, and they were very hesitant. I don't come from an entertainment family. My dad worked on Wall Street until he retired. My mom was a vocational rehab counselor. So they didn't really know how to do it. And they found a friend of a friend who knew an agent. A manager, actually. I went in to meet the manager. I'd always been taught never to speak to strangers. So I refused to speak to the manager. The manager was like, he's cute, bring him back when he'll, talk. And so they did. I begged and begged and begged. It was something that I desperately wanted. And so I started acting when I was 7 and a half, and just stayed in the industry from that point on. But it was really, it's as a child actor, you meet a lot of other kid actors, and there's always a certain chunk of them who are sort of there because you can see the parents are trying to fulfill a dream, or the parents want them to do it. I was really, it was a great process for me because it truly was something that just came from my total love of film and TV.
That's amazing. I mean, that's really fortunate to find at a young age. And I mean, you ended up going to Columbia, correct? And studying film there.
I did. Yeah, they didn't have a proper film program. It was a cinema studies program. So it was like film theory and stuff. But I did. I was forced to go to Columbia. I really did not want to go to school. I did freshman year and then took some time off to work and told my parents I was dropping out, and they were crestfallen. They were just devastated. And I tried to explain to them how I was going to stop college and just go off and be a screenwriter. And my mom, who was a lovely, lovely woman, said she understood, but that if I did that, she would kill my father, which seemed excessive because my dad was not really urging me to drop out. She just knew that I loved him. And so she leveraged that into me finishing school, which, to be honest, in my case at Columbia was a tremendous waste of time. Columbia's cinema studies program was just so the antithesis of everything I like about film. Any commercial filmmaker, they just hated. You know, it was one of those programs where it was just like, Spielberg's overrated. And you're like, I don't know. I think he's kind of Steven Spielberg feels about right. So, but I did it. I did it for my parents, but my mom in particular. And then started working as a screenwriter sort of towards the end of senior year of my time there, and then got the heck out.
Nice. So also to introduce myself, my name is Miguel. I'm a senior here at Wesleyan, and I'm about to go into the real world soon. And I was wondering, what made you know, like, when did you know that you wanted to be a screenwriter? And I'm asking that as someone, like, I love acting and screenwriting. That's the two things I love most. So I want to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was sort of two phases of the process. I'd been acting, as I said, from a really young age. I sort of got into writing in a weird way. I started out writing for a place called the Global Information System. That was my first paid writing gig. Was it was basically a think tank. Growing up in New York, my dad had worked across the street from the World Trade Center, so he was there on 9/11. That had a big impact on me. And I just got really curious about the Middle East. And so that led me ultimately to doing an internship between 11th and 12th grade. And they hired me. When I finished my senior year of high school, they said, come, be our UN correspondent. Because at that point I'd gotten into Columbia. They knew I was going to be New York based. And so that was my first experience as a paid writer. And I quickly figured out that I enjoyed writing. I did not enjoy that particular kind of writing. That was just, the stakes were way too high for me. But I found my way through that and thought, oh, this would kind of be an interesting story for a movie. A kid who kind of young goes to work for a private intelligence service. And it felt like 3 Days of the Condor in high school. And so I wrote that. And I remember getting the Sid Field CD-ROM that came with Final Draft. Back in the day when you bought Final Draft, there was a Sid Field 3-act structure guide. And I sat there and learned 3-act structure. And that was really my first time writing a feature-length script. And I thought, this is good. I like this. So I think that was the first part of the journey for me, was going, this is a possibility. And then the second part was realizing that there was actually a way to turn it into a career. That there was the moment of, this is fun. And then there was the moment of, I can actually make a living and sort of start to build something real out of this. And that was right at the end of college. I'd gotten my first literary agent and ended up getting my first real paying gig as a screenwriter.
Do you have any good stories from that time that you're legally allowed to tell us?
Oh, from when
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I mean, I have so many stories. It was just fascinating. I'll never forget my first week at the UN. The first source I made there, this really lovely guy who worked on UNMIVIC, which was the UN weapons inspection team that was inspecting Iraq under Saddam to make sure that he was abiding by the terms of the 98 ceasefire, make sure he wasn't building chemical and biological weapons. And it was really cool. I got to meet him, and he sits me down in the cafeteria, and he goes, nothing important will be said in this building. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, too many spies, too many listening devices. No one will ever say anything of value. You got the worst assignment there is in journalism. If you want to go do something meaningful, get out of here, because no one will ever say anything that matters in this building, because you can't keep a secret here. And that was I think that was probably the first meeting where I went, this is a spy movie. I can turn this into something. So yeah, it was a really lot of wild stories and a lot of just sort of very, for me, it was very eye-opening about how much more James Bondy spy world the real world was than I would have imagined.
Wow, that's crazy.
It was a weird experience. I ended up going to speechwrite for an Iranian opposition leader for a little while. This guy named Assad Homiyoun, who I'd done an interview with, and he ended up liking me, and we had sort of, similar ideas about the world. And so it was a great experience, but it was all very clear to me that I should be writing made up stuff and not anything that anyone took seriously. I mean, because that was the other really weird part of the experience. I knew a lot about the Middle East. I was, a voracious reader of material, and I developed sources through that company. They were really amazing. But I was, I've never been to the Middle East. I've still never been to the Middle East. So my level of experience in Middle Eastern affairs was, Hebrew school. So the fact that I was in that job seemed really inappropriate, but ultimately it was a really important period for me in terms of figuring out what I wanted to do. And I learned a lot, and it's stuff that still comes into play when, if I'm writing a script that's based in reality. Like, for instance, I've just been working on this project recently about the anthrax attacks after 9/11. And it's been great because I have all these resources, all these people I used to work with who I can call up and start to do my own investigation of, rather than relying on sort of a book or an article. So it's come into play in ways I would not have imagined at the beginning.
That's just so unconventionally like amazing though, because I feel like it's such like a random thing, like random continuation of events that was such an influential part of your career. Like that's what made you write.
Yeah, I mean, really, in theory, there was a less circuitous path to being a screenwriter, given that I was already in the industry, working as an actor, but I just had never made that connection. And I think the other thing for me was I was really insecure about becoming a screenwriter, because every actor in New York thought they were a writer. Every time I talked to one of my actor friends, they were working on a screenplay. And so to me, it just felt like, oh, I don't want to be one of those actors who thinks he's a writer. And so I was very cautious about starting the writing. And then when I did the writing, I was really cautious about telling anyone. I was almost like a little embarrassed. I didn't want to seem like a phony. So I think that's something that at the beginning of my career was a hurdle I had to overcome, was just accepting that I was really a writer. I had to take myself seriously, which was not an immediately obvious thing, given that just, a lot of people want to write, not everyone can do it. And it was hard for me to convince myself at first that I might be someone who could.
Wow. So from there, I mean, you began to write clearly after that. So what was it like writing those first scripts? I mean, I feel like that's probably just like finishing the scripts from start to finish must be insanely hard to begin with.
It's always hard. Yeah, it's always hard. And it doesn't really, at least in my experience, get easier. I'm in the middle of a script right now. I have to turn it in soon. It's just as hard as the first script that I wrote, at least, in my mind. But it was great. I mean, I wrote that first script about my experience at GIS and at the UN. At the time, I was repped by an agency in New York called Abrams, mostly an acting agency. They had a literary department. I begged them to take a look at my script. The script was 169 pages. And the literary agent said, I'm not reading this. Bring it back to me when it's 120. I remember that day very clearly. I had classes all day at Columbia. I cut all my classes. I went to a coffee shop. I cut the script down from 169 to 118 that day. And I hand delivered her the script at the end of the day. And I said, here's the rewrite. And she read it and signed me. And so I remember that being my first experience. And then, it was hard. It was really hard because having written that script, it went in a few places. No one bought it. It got me an agent, but it didn't really sort of start the ball rolling. And I thought, okay, well, that was a good experience. It got me the first piece of the puzzle, representation, but I should try to do something I can actually get made. And so then I went and did a short film, which was a lot of fun. I did a 20-minute comedy short that I acted in, and that was just a blast. And it made me think, okay, I could write comedy. I could maybe try a feature comedy. And that led me to the script. That was really the script that started my whole career. I wrote a script called The Last First Time. So now I'm in my senior year of college, and I wrote this romantic comedy that was about a guy trying to lose his virginity in the 2 days before a meteor hits the world and destroys everything. And he falls in love with the one girl on Earth who is not convinced the world is ending. And they go on this adventure. And I remember writing that. And I remember bringing it to my then agent at Abrams, who read it and said, I don't get it. And I was like, I could see you not liking it, but like, it's pretty, what's not to get? It's a sex comedy, wants to lose virginity, the world's gonna explode. And she said, well, we'll get a second opinion. She sent it to a friend of hers at AOL, which made no sense to me. And she said, oh, my buddy at AOL, really didn't like it either. And I thought, well, why would we AOL? What does she know about movies? And I was sort of on my own at that point with that script. And I went on IMDb Pro and I just looked through the list of directors who I thought would be right for the movie. And I wanted to find a director who was big enough to matter, talented enough that it would be exciting, but also dumb enough to put their direct contact info on there. And inexplicably, one of my favorite directors, Jonathan Lynn, this amazing British filmmaker who directed My Cousin Vinny, and just he's a genius, for some reason, I will never understand why, had his email address on his IMDb Pro page. So I emailed him directly and said, hey, I'm a huge fan. I wrote this screenplay. Would you mind taking a look? And he said, sure, send it over. Read it, called me a week later, said I want to do it. And that was sort of a big hinge point in my career. The film never got made, but that was a script that then had a huge impact on my life.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, did your hesitation, we have a question from the audience actually, but did your hesitation to be open about writing when you started have any effect on your actual writing or writing process?
Yeah, 100%. It had an effect on my writing process in the sense that I would freeze up more. You know what I mean? I was very afraid to write the worst stuff I could write, which is an organic part of the, when you're, certainly for me, when I'm writing, my floor in terms of what I'm capable of at my worst days as a writer has not moved up. My ceiling has gone up, right? When I'm having a good day as a writer, I definitely feel I've grown and I'm better than I've ever been. But when I'm at my worst, when I can't crack a scene, it's the same level of garbage as when I was 16, 17, first trying to figure out how to write a screenplay. And I think the challenge is when you're, certainly for me, when I was first starting out, I didn't realize that I had to just keep writing through those pages. I was so sort of mortified and wasn't sure if I was really a writer yet that when I saw my worst pages on a screen in front of me, it was kind of like paralyzing. I was like, oh boy, I can't be a professional writer if I'm capable of this. And it would make me not write. You know, I'd hit a wall block, I hit a roadblock, and instead of just writing through it, I'd say, okay, I'm done. I got to step away from it for a second. And I think if I've gotten better at anything, it's an ability to know that I'm going to have days where the quality is not what I want it to be, where I can't crack a scene, but that's okay. That's just the process. But that comes also with starting to believe in yourself more as a writer and knowing that you'll sort of write your way through those problems.
Also wanted to ask you, what are some of the sources that have really like helped you learn the craft of writing?
I mean, the biggest thing for me is watching films. The way I really learned how to write movies is, ironically enough, that Sid Field 3-act structure thing that came with Final Draft. Yeah. I had never heard of 3-act structure. I didn't know from 3-act structure. But then once I sort of read that, because he had a book as well, and once I read that book, and one other book, Chris Vogler, the Writer's Journey, which is sort of based on the Joseph Campbell Hero's Journey myth. Those two books were helpful to me. And you know what I did was I would rewatch all my favorite films and I would break down the structure. Essentially, I wrote outlines of every movie I loved. And I would look at what happened at what minute, what page count, and try to understand why I loved the films I loved and how I could learn from it. And, you know, it's still something I do. You know, when I start a new project, I will usually watch films that inspired the project and break down the structure and go, okay, why do I love that movie? What can I learn? What do I want to do? What do I want to not do? So that was those two books, and the general process of watching films and outlining them like a crazy person really helped me.
That's
so
yeah.
Yeah, no. I also wanted to ask the question about, like, in your day-to-day life, what's your writing process like?
It's constant. I mean, the thing is, usually I'll have one or two things I'm working on simultaneously. I try to only be working on one first draft at a time, because the first draft is just so incredible. Something from nothing is really hard. So I'll try to only have one of those, and then I'll usually have one or two other things floating out there that I'm either rewriting or, you know, doing documents on. It's a big part of the writing process that you don't even realize when you get into it. Half the time you're not writing screenplays. You're writing outlines. You're writing outlines of what the rewrite is going to be, you know. So to me, it's sort of a mix of those on a daily basis, but it's pretty much constant. I do a little bit of producing now, and so that'll take up some of my day. I try to do that stuff in the beginning part of the day. I'm a night owl, so I'll write very late. I'll write until, you know, 4 or 5 in the morning, and then I'll wake up around 10:30. I'll, you know, do some calls. I'll do the producing stuff because my writing brain is not awake yet. And then what I wrote the night before, we'll see if any of it is salvageable. If some is, then that's really good news. And then I just start going.
And okay, so also I'm a really big night owl myself. And I wanted to know, like, what's it like navigating the industry as a night owl?
It's great. I mean, one of the things you'll find is that, certainly for me, when I started, I had a very specific process. I only could write at night. I like to be at my desk. I like the reflection in the window there so I could sort of see myself performing the scenes as I was. It was like, it all had to be just so. And then the minute you get an opportunity, for me, it was Ice Age 4, where I had to be in an office. Animation is a really weird brand of screenwriting that is, for me, the closest thing I guess I'll ever have to a real job, if I'm lucky, where you go into the studio every day. And so I had to be at the studio at 9 a.m. I was living in New York, commuting up to Greenwich, Connecticut. And so I had to suddenly change my process and be ready to start pumping out pages 9:30 a.m., 10:30 a.m., because you're writing the film sequence by sequence, scene by scene, and handing off the pages to the artists who then go off and draw them and hand them off to editorial who'd smash them together. So, it's a business that works really well if you're a night owl. You just have to be flexible and know that once you're in a situation that doesn't allow for your particular process, you just have to adapt. I will say one trick that's helpful is working with British filmmakers. That's the best because they're on your time zone. So I'm working with a British filmmaker right now, and it's the dream because he's waking up when I'm going to work. So when it comes to doing note sessions and stuff, it's kind of ideal because I work, as I said, I work straight through the night, so I can talk to him 1 in, 2 in, and it's kind of the dream.
I remember that.
I love that you're a night owl. I think it's just makes sense. We have a question from the audience that says, I think you'll know who this one's from. He said, how do you find a good lawyer?
Hi, Michael. I don't know. Does the audience know about our...
No, they don't. We don't need to get into it, but Jason has a great lawyer. So
I have an amazing attorney named Michael Shankman. The lawyer part of this, at least for me, sort of came very organically from the process of getting an agent. I had a lawyer in New York who I met through a friend of a friend. Was not a perfect fit for me, but it was the person I had at the time. Ultimately, that script I referred to a little bit ago, The Last First Time, that romantic comedy, that script bopped around the industry, and it became a script that assistants passed around to one another. So assistants would send it, and this is really common in scripts, assistants will read something and go, oh, this is cool, and send it to a buddy. That ended up at the desk of someone at what was then Endeavor, now WME, an agent. I guess then he wasn't an agent yet. He was a coordinator, a guy named Simon Faber, who is now my manager and one of my closest friends. And Simon had worked with Michael, my now lawyer, and said, you need a good lawyer. Go sit with Michael. And Michael was, I was at the very early phase of my career. Michael was already a big shot. And there was no, he had like all these huge A-list clients, and you walk in and it's very exciting. And I one of the things that I think, and this is the smallest piece of advice because there's so many more important things, but I've really tried to enjoy every win of my career. It's really hard to do this. It's really hard to work in the film industry. And so one of the things I've always tried to do is when good things happen, really enjoy the moment, not make too much of it, but appreciate it. And so I remember meeting Michael and Michael saying he wanted to work with me and being really excited. That was a win. A big shot LA lawyer was getting worked with all these, Chris Nolan, all these cool people was going to work with me. It was a win. It was really exciting and validating. And you'll get enough rejection, enough pushback that you sort of have to protect those wins and nurture them and hold on to them. And Michael has been one of the best professional and personal relationships of my life. Michael's been amazing.
That's very sweet of you. I actually do have a question.
We've done Jewish holidays together with him and his family.
I said that. You've come to Temple with us. Okay.
Michael has been, I can't imagine what my career would look like without 3 people. And that's Michael, my lawyer, Simon Faber, who was my agent, now my manager, and Emily Gerson-Sains, who's been my manager since I was 21. So yeah, you need help.
How important for you has it been to have like representation that supports you and you feel close to them? Because that seems like it's been a really big part of your career.
Oh, I don't know how, I guess things have changed a bit, and there's obviously a lot of amazingly talented people who generate stuff outside of the system and are maybe a little less dependent on representation. But for me, I could not get past the gatekeepers. As I said, I didn't come from a family who worked in the industry or had any connections in the industry. I didn't have a viral video that blew up and had, millions of people asking who I was. I just wanted to write movies and needed people who believed in my ability to do that, who were already past the gates, to tap other people on the shoulder and go, hey, you should read this guy's script. You should take him seriously. And so for me, it was a critical part of the process. And Ice Age was only a thing because of Simon, right? I had no way, without Simon as my agent, how would Fox have known I existed? Again, presumably I could have, made another short film and hoped that became a phenomenon. My short film did well. We got into Cannes. That was really exciting, but it didn't catalyze into this crazy thing where there was a lot of incoming calls. It just was this good piece of tape and a good script. And so, yeah, I mean, getting a movie made is really hard. And I think that's you guys out there in the audience, probably because you're film students, have a little bit more of an awareness of this than the general audience. But there are many writers who are really successful, really highly paid, who never have a film made. It's really hard. It's this weird thing where people work and work and work. And so I understood that really quickly because I talked to people in the industry and I had friends who were writers, and I really, in addition to wanting to be successful and independent, I really wanted to make movies. For me, it wasn't just about being able to pay my bills as a writer, although that was really important. I wanted to see my work realized, and I don't know what my path to that would have been without the team that I had. And Ice Age was really the first integral step to that, which was all Simon sending the last first time to someone at Fox Animation reading it, saying, hey, come in for a meeting. And that was a life-changing opportunity.
It's amazing. I think Miguel has,
There's another question from the audience. Max Jones asks, what's a script you've written and gotten made that you're not proud of or wish you would approach differently? And which one would you not change at all?
A script that I wrote that did get made.
It looks like,
that I'm not proud of.
Or that you would have at least approached differently, yeah.
I'm definitely proud of all of them. I think it's hard to, it's interesting. I think I probably would have asked the same question before I realized how insanely hard it is to get anything made. So I kind of look at anything that gets made as a big win. I certainly have my preferences among the films I've had made of what I like more, what I like less, what's sort of closer to the movie I had in my head, what's a little further away. But they're all sort of your kids. So it's very hard to choose between them. And it's very hard to not feel pride in them, because you are, at least for me, it's impossible to separate myself and look at it just as a member of the audience and judge the film on its own merits, because I'm looking back on, 5 years, 4 years, 6, whatever the case may be. You're looking at a huge chunk of your life and what it took to get it across the finish line. So I don't necessarily look at any of the films I've had made and go, oh, I wish I'd done that differently. I certainly, may look at particular scripts and go, oh, I wish I'd thought of that. I wish I'd thought of this. But it's more my actual screenplays than the finished product.
All right, and another question that we have from the audience, Heather Castle asks, as a writer, how much input or control do you have in other aspects of production, like casting, costumes, day-to-day changes to the script during shooting? And how much communication do you have with other parts in the production process?
Varies wildly, really varies. So the first film I ever had made was a Nickelodeon TV musical called Rags. It's a Cinderella story with a gender swap. And I have still not met the director of that film. Seems like a lovely guy, did a very good job. I actually really liked the movie, never met him. And then there are other films you work on, Pan, for instance, Joe Wright. Joe was awesome and included me in the process in a really meaningful way. And I got to be on set for a huge chunk of that shoot. So it varies wildly, sort of film by film. And sometimes you get to work with the director. Sometimes you never meet the director. And then other times you really get to build meaningful friendships with the filmmaker. And It Chapter 2, as I point to a poster you guys can't see, It Chapter 2 is sort of an example of a movie where, Andy Muschietti, who directed it, Barbara Muschietti, who produced it, they became two of my favorite people in the world and really important friends. So it varies extremely wildly. But it's one of those things that, my understanding, I haven't worked as much in TV, But my sense is that in TV, writers have a lot more of a sense of authorship. You have a little bit more control. You know what I mean? The boss in TV is the showrunner, who is a writer. The boss in film is definitely the director. You know, everyone says film is director's medium, and it's very true.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about like your specific projects right now, if that's cool? So you work, yeah, so like Ice Age was your first major thing, Continental Drift.
Yes.
What was it like writing for animation? I mean, that must have been so fun to begin with.
Coolest thing ever. It was like grad school for me. I learned so much. The thing about animation is you're writing the script at the same time that they're doing storyboards, at the same time that certain sequences that are a little further along in the process are being animated, and you're having actors come in. So it's really folding development, pre-production, production, and post into one sort of simultaneous thing rather than it being sequential the way it is in live action. And it was great. I mean, it was mind-blowing. I got to co-write it and work with this writer, Michael Berg, who had co-written the first and the third, and then he came in and co-wrote the fifth film after me. So he was kind of the Ice Age veteran, and I was the rookie coming in. I think I turned 24 the first week I started on that film. So I was really young. I looked even younger. No one thought I was writing the movie. Everyone, you have to understand, you're going to the actual physical studio. So in this case, it's Blue Sky Studios, and it's, I don't know, 400 people in that building between the artists, the animators. It's a huge thing. And everyone thought I was either the producer's nephew or assistant for the first month. I mean, just no one sort of understood what I fit into the process. And then about a month or two in, I think people started to accept me. I was also coming into a franchise that was hugely successful, all without me, and 4 films deep. And so I imagine, it felt like what I imagine it must be like to be, if you're a rookie, drafted to play for a championship team, where you're just trying to learn and figure out how things work. But it was great. It was a really amazing learning experience.
I may be biased, but that is my favorite Ice Age. So that's
good
one.
I mean, it was, when you're 4 films in, you have such license to kind of go off and do things like a pirate movie. And so that was really cool. And, you know, it was a very talented group. Lori Forte, who produces those films, is really sort of, Ice Age is her brainchild. She came up with it originally. She's been there on every film. And it was cool to learn from her and see how a good producer understands what makes their franchise great. You could do something that's successful and still not understand why it was successful, and that makes it really hard to replicate. You know, you go to a movie and then you see the sequel and you're like, oh, the sequel kind of sucks. What happened there? And I think the reason those films have been so consistently good is Lori. She has a really remarkable insight into why her films work. And it was very cool. Yeah, it was a really awesome learning experience.
Experience like co-writing movies with other people, and what advice do you have for people about collaborating with other writers?
Look, I think that it's all about who you're co-writing with. You know, Ice Age, I was lucky enough to work with Michael. Wonder Woman, I was lucky enough to work with Zack Snyder and Alan Heinberg. So when you're working with writers like that, it's extraordinary, you know, because you're working with people who, certainly in the case of someone like Zach, are filmmakers and creators that you look up to. Alan's someone that I'm a huge fan of. He's written some of my favorite comics and TV, and he's just, you know, it's very easy when you're lucky enough to be gifted collaborators like that. I think the trick of it really is also just being appreciative of how lucky we are to be writing for a living. It makes you a lot more collaborative. You know, I just still can't believe that I get to do this every day. Even at my sort of most frustrated moments when I can't figure out a scene and I'm pulling my hair out of my head, there's always a part of me that just can't get over the fact that I've built a life and a career making up stuff and creating movies. It's just the coolest thing ever. And so to me, what it did for, you know, in my career was it made me really flexible and really collaborative and open to possibilities. I think it's very easy to say, okay, this is the kind of filmmaker I am. This is what I'm going to do. And certainly that might work for some people. And if it does, then that's great. But for me, I knew the kinds of movies I wanted to write, but I was always open to opportunities. You know, it wasn't like when I was starting to think about being a screenwriter, I said, I've got to write Nickelodeon movie musicals. Someone give me that. It wasn't on my radar. But when Nickelodeon says to you at 22, when no one's ever paid you a dime to write a film, hey, do you want to come write a Nickelodeon movie? You go, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. And, you know, Ice Age was another example where I love animation. Was it the thing at the forefront of my mind? No. But then suddenly you have this opportunity in front of you and you go, oh my God, I have to devote the next 2 years of my life to this. This is great. So I think that certainly in my career, an ability to be really grateful for the opportunities and very open to whatever that means, as long as it means you're working on stuff you're excited about and you're actually, you know, building towards something. So I've been very lucky with the collaborators I've had. I can imagine that for other writers, you know, it may sometimes be difficult, particularly if you come from background where you write stuff all by yourself. But I would look at it just as an awesome opportunity to learn and also to build relationships. You know, you never know who's worked on what and what you guys can team up on and find other projects together. So yeah, I think just be open to the possibilities.
Yeah. You wrote Pan and made the blacklist in 2013, which is an incredible accomplishment. So bravo to you on that. What was it like pitching the project and converting it from script to screen? I mean, in many interviews, you describe it as your passion project. So yeah, I can imagine like that was a hard thing to like have to accept that other people were going to work on it as well.
And what? No, it was a great thing. I mean, Pan was an original idea I had. I took it out as a pitch. In, I don't remember when, 2012, maybe 2013. I took it out right after Ice Age, and everyone passed. Everyone at the time had competing Peter Pan projects. It was just this moment where and as a writer, you find this, something's in the zeitgeist and then everyone's doing it. So every studio I went to said, this is great. We're actually doing a Peter Pan prequel. We're doing a Peter Pan sequel. We're doing steampunk Peter. Everyone had a Peter Pan project. And so it died. It just died. And the only studio I had not pitched to was Warner Brothers. And I ended up maybe a year and a half later, 2 years later, going into a pitch at Warner's on something unrelated, an open writing assignment, which your audience may or may not, but OWAs, open writing assignments, are when a studio has a script that they want rewritten, or they have a comic book or a book, an idea, but it's a writing assignment. They go to the agencies and they say, hey, who would be good for this? And you essentially audition to write that particular movie. And OWAs are a big part of how you build your career as a feature screenwriter. So I went in on an OWA, I pitched. The studio executive was a woman named Sarah Schechter. Sarah Schechter called up after and said, look, we could buy this from you. We're never gonna make this movie. I don't wanna waste your time. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, yeah, but the paycheck would be helpful. And she's like, no, forget it. Let's find something else to do. Come back, sit with me, let's find something. And so I took a general, which is another sort of common thing in the industry. You meet people oftentimes without a specific purpose, just to get to know them. And hopefully down the line, you find some way to connect the dots. And that was the most productive general of my life. Sarah and another executive at Warner Brothers, Andy Fischel, who's no longer at WB, I think he's at Netflix now, said, what do you want to do? If you could write anything, what would it be? And I said, oh, if I could write anything, it would be my Peter Pan origin story. And they said, well, what is it? And at that point, you have to understand, I had that story memorized. And I could have pitched, if you'd woken me up at 3 a.m, I could have pitched you it verbatim with the same intonations and the same shtick. It was down to a science. And so I did it. And she said, well, that's really cool. You should go meet Greg Berlanti, who's a producer with a deal on the lot. Tell him about it. Let's figure this out. And so it was this miracle of a thing, because it had been completely dead. And suddenly it was moving at breakneck speed. And Greg Berlanti came on, and then Joe Wright came on. And it was really an extraordinary experience to see how fast things can come together when you have the machine of a big Hollywood studio like Warner Brothers behind it 1,000%. And they were. And it's an interesting experience, because Pan was a script, as you said, it was on the blacklist. It was one of these scripts that, was well received and helped me get more work, and that people really seemed to like. And it was a movie that was just an epic failure, right? Pan is one of those movies that is on that list of, like, I don't know, Ishtar, right? One of these giant money. I think the studio lost, 200 million, some insane number where your head explodes. And it was an interesting learning experience in terms of how to react to something like that, and how to process that information when, you read the Hollywood Reporter and you go, oh, so my baby, the thing I love, just cost them $250 million. Is that all? And it was, you know, for me, really, I think an amazing opportunity to kind of grow as a writer and to just continue moving forward, because your big fear is that you write something and it's not well received. It happened, and you wake up the next day and it's all good. You know, that is one of the blessings about being a writer as opposed to a director. It is a little harder as a filmmaker. You know, people talk about director jail. It's a little harder when a movie doesn't work as a filmmaker. So we talked about it being a director's medium and the director's the boss. That's all really good. The flip side of that is that you also bear a lot of, you know, in the eyes of people in the industry, it seems you bear a lot of responsibility. In this particular case, I don't think Joe should have borne any responsibility. And Joe really, I think, wasn't affected by it because he's had such an amazing body of work that it was a blip. You know what I mean? I think he had the same disappointment all of us who worked on the film shared, but it didn't have an impact. But it really was a great opportunity to go, oh, so things cannot work, things can go sideways, things can blow up in epic, spectacular fashion. And the next day is kind of like the day before it. You get up, do some calls, start writing, and life goes on.
So after Pan, you were writing for Wonder Woman, and I wanted to ask, what's it like working for DC, and did you read the comics when you were growing up?
Wonder Woman, I will say, definitely softened the blow of Pan.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, when I say I woke up the next morning and wrote, I literally woke up the next morning and was writing Wonder Woman. So it was a blessing that I had that opportunity. And it's also one of those things where you realize, you know, if not for Pan, Wonder Woman never would have happened. Wonder Woman happened for me because I was writing Pan at Warner Brothers. I am a DC comic book maniac. I've always been a comic book nut. My dad loves comics. He really sort of brought me into that world. And Wonder Woman was always my favorite superhero. I loved Wonder Woman. I grew up with sort of the George Perez late 80s run of Wonder Woman. That was kind of my formative experience reading comics. And so when I was at the studio working on Pan, said to Simon, then my agent, how do I get into DC? I know they're doing Batman v Superman. I know that at that point, I think it had already been leaked or been announced that Wonder Woman was going to be in Batman v Superman. And I said, how do I get in there? And so he connected me with John Berg, who at that time was running DC Films. He was sort of the Kevin Feige architect of the DC universe at that moment. And I sat down with John and I said, you gotta give me an opportunity to write Wonder Woman. I don't know if you guys are thinking about doing a Wonder Woman movie. I don't know where you're at in the process, but I have a Wonder Woman movie in my head. How do I get a shot? And John was an amazing advocate, gave me an opportunity to pitch, brought me in to meet then the head of the studio, pitched it, and he bought it. And it was, one of the most exciting days of my life was pitching Wonder Woman, walking out and knowing I then had the opportunity to go write that. So that was really a dream come true. I mean, I'm very lucky to be writing at this moment in time that I'm writing where superhero movies have just exploded. You know what I mean? Where there's multiple universes in the multiverse in the DC world. And for someone who grew up as a huge fan of comics and especially a DC fan, it's kind of a really unique moment to be writing films. So the experience was really great at DC Films. It was wonderful. And, you know, I've had a chance to work there twice. Wonder Woman under the previous regime, John Berg, Jeff Johns, who were running DC Films. And then I wrote another film for them called Lobo, which I'm hopeful at some point we get to make sort of an intergalactic bounty hunter movie. But that was under Walter Hamada, who's running it now. So it's exciting to see what Walter and that whole group are building out. I'm hopeful that Lobo gets to be a part of it.
We also have a question from the audience about Wonder Woman. So it's on IMDb. It says you're credited with the story on Wonder Woman and the screenplay on Ice Age: Continental Drift. Could you speak on the differences between writing the story and writing the screenplay? And is this what happens with large blockbuster franchise films?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, writing screenplay for story can mean different things on different projects. So the way everything works, credit is ultimately determined by a WG arbitration process. So on these bigger movies, Pan's an exception, but usually on these larger films, Ice Age 4 would be another example. There's 3 credited writers on Ice Age 4, which is myself, Michael Berg, and Laurie Forte. Laurie has a story credit on that movie. And then what happens is over the course of these large movies, multiple other writers usually come in and do passes and directors. And sometimes they'll do what they call table work, where essentially they'll bring in a group of 8 to 10 writers who just sit around a table and pitch. If it's a comedy, they'll pitch joke ideas. If it's an action movie, they'll pitch action ideas. And so the process of making one of these massive movies from a writing standpoint is really kind of, it's a team effort. And then the difference between screenplay and story also varies from film to film. So story can mean that you wrote a story document, right? Maybe you're the first writer in or one of the early writers, and you write a 5-page document that outlines the bulk of what the story is going to be. And perhaps you don't end up ever writing a screenplay, right? But your story contributions from that document are so significant that the WJ awards you a story or a shared story credit. In other circumstances, Wonder Woman would be an example of this. Wonder Woman I worked on for 2 years, right? So I wrote originally outlines and story documents, but I was writing screenplays of that throughout the whole process. And then ultimately it goes to an arbitration process, and the guild looks at, okay, well, where were the contributions most significant? Was it more significant in terms of what scene structure and dialogue, or was it more significant in terms of story structure? And in the case of Wonder Woman, the arbitration was that the contributions were more significant with respect to the story structure and the plotting rather than scene work or dialogue. It's sort of a simple enough way, I guess, of breaking down the way those credits are determined and what the difference is.
We have another question from the audience, from Simon. Did you change your writing process at all after Pan? How much do you take into account your audience's interests, and do you implement what you think the audience will like, even when it may go against what you're actually passionate about writing?
That's a good question. I would say that I'll answer the last part of that first. In terms of how you think about what the audience wants, it's you balance it. I know some writers, some creators will just say, I write what I like, and I hope the audience likes it too. I don't. I write what I like, but I also try to put myself in the shoes of the audience, and that's a trick that I picked up from Lori on that first Ice Age. And some of the most successful people I've ever worked with or met have been people who are very cognizant of what the audience is thinking. I worked very briefly on a film that Tom Cruise was going to act in that never got made, probably won't ever get made, but it was just the coolest thing to meet Tom Cruise. I mean, that was surreal. And I remember him being so cognizant of what an audience's expectations of a Tom Cruise film would be, what their expectations of him would be, how to subvert those, how to surprise. And so he came at it in a similar way to Lori Forte, in a similar way to some of those successful people I've worked with, where they're very passionate. They've got really clear ideas about what they want, what they like, what they don't, and simultaneously an awareness of what an audience might want or expect. And I think that's important because you don't know how to surprise an audience if you don't know what they're expecting. So I try to be mindful of both. The first part of the question was, did I change my writing sort of style or anything about my process after Pan? I did, but I think that's true after every script. I wish that I could say that the box office failure of Pan had a more specific lesson to be taught in terms of how I approach the screenplay. I think at least for me, it was more just going, okay, here are things I don't love about the way that movie went down in terms of, what in thinking back on the creative. Here are things I could have done better as a writer. Here are things I could have thought more about or spent more time on. And then you try to implement them.
Okay. Do you have any projects coming up that you're excited about, or how do you choose the projects you're working on right now?
Yeah, no, I have a few. I have a few things I'm working on. A lot of them I can't talk about yet. I'm trying to think of what I can. Oh, I know what I can say something about. I'm working on a Prince Charming film for Disney. I'm really excited about that. So we're doing I think this has been announced. So maybe not that I'm working on it, but I think Disney had announced they were working on a Prince Charming film with Mandeville, the guys who produced the Beauty and the Beast films, and Trip Vincent, another amazing producer. And so that's something that I'm deep into now, which is so much fun. Sort of Princess Bride in tone, and yeah. So I'm hopeful that keeps going.
I love that so much.
Yeah. So that's taken up a big chunk of time, and then a bunch of other super secret stuff that you probably know about. Michael certainly knows about, but that I can't say anything about just yet. But a few things. Working on a TV series I'm really excited about. That something that has a sort of a built-in fan base based on a piece of IP that means a lot to me, and then a film. I wrote an original for the first time in a minute. I sort of during the quarantine thought, you know what, I want to do something original. I've been so lucky in terms of the kinds of comics or books that I've been able to adapt, but I really want to do something that is just purely mine. And so I took some time, sat down, wrote an original spec, which I hadn't done in a minute, and so that's one of the sort of secret things that I think we're moving at a good clip on, and hopefully I'll get to talk to people about soon, because it's something I'm really proud of.
Lockdown's been good for you, it seems, to some extent. You've been busy.
You try to make the best of crazy, tough situations like this, and obviously so many people have had it so much worse. So when you're in a situation like this, where you go, okay, I'm lucky enough to still be able to work, I'm lucky enough to be healthy, I'm lucky enough that the people around me have been healthy. Yeah, you sort of count your blessings, and very easy to be grateful and focus on getting some writing done.
So I'm very happy that you brought up The Princess Bride, because that for me was like a very formative movie. And I'm just curious, like what other movies have been like really formative for you and have had like really big influences on your writing?
Biggest one is Superman. Superman 78, Richard Donner. That film has been a massive, I mean, that was the movie that made me want to be in film. That movie transported me in a way that almost nothing else has. And I think the ability to do something that is wish fulfillment and fantastical, but also really grounded emotionally. I don't know, for me, Superman's a really emotional film. I always love listening to the making of featurettes about stuff and hearing how the filmmakers have a totally different perspective. And I remember listening to the making of featurette of Superman, and everyone talking about how, yeah, we just, we did it with a wink at the audience, and we didn't want to take it too seriously. And I, watching that movie as a 7-year-old, I was like, this is deadly serious. Like I had no idea that this was like a fun romp. I was like, California's going to break off the country. Fucking Luther. So Superman was amazingly formative because it combines all the things that I really love in movies when they're at their best. It was fun and funny and exciting and emotional and just cool. And one of the highlights of my career was being at the Wonder Woman premiere and seeing Richard Donner and going up to Richard Donner, directed Superman, and saying, Mr. Donner, I don't want to bother you. I just want to say I co-wrote the film tonight, and it is directly inspired by Superman. That is, probably my favorite movie of all time. And Richard Donner looks at me and goes, "No kidding, me too." Richard Donner, cool, love it. So Superman's a big one for me. Classic Spielberg, E.T., Close Encounters, Jaws, all those are formative movies for me. It's really those 80s. In terms of filmmakers, it's Steven Spielberg, George Lucas. It's that era, Robert Zemeckis, Romancing the Stone. All those are really big touchstones in terms of, and they're the kinds of films that I don't think get to be made as much now. So it's kind of a bummer that you don't see as many of those films, but it's also exciting to be in a space where, like for instance, the spec I wrote, I want to write movies like that. And I'm hopeful that it sort of feels like it's inspired by some of those movies. I would also say from a purely writing standpoint, I know I'm talking about filmmakers, the writer who I am the most inspired by and feel I've learned the most from is Robert Mark Kamen. Robert Kamen is just one of these, he's become a friend of mine as the years have gone on, but from a purely film fan standpoint, pound for pound, I don't know that there's a single screenwriter who's made the same kind of contributions to commercial cinema. Robert wrote Karate Kid, Lethal Weapon 2, Lethal Weapon 3, The Fifth Element, the Taken franchise. I mean, he's just one of these guys where you look at decade after decade, and what I think he's been able to do, in addition to having these really commercially successful movies, his movies where you remember the lines. You think about Taken and the way that becomes a quotable film, or Wax On, Wax Off, and Karate Kid. There aren't a lot of writers who have a dozen of those classic movie lines and classic movie moments. And Robert just continues to pump them out year after year, film after film. So he's someone I look to and learn a lot from his work, but also aspire to, if I'm lucky enough, have 1/4 of the kind of career that he's had, because it's been pretty special.
Okay, we are being told we need to wrap up soon. So to end it off, do you have, what advice do you have for people who want to write or make it in the industry or work in entertainment or just love entertainment in general and are considering it?
I wish I had something super profound to say. I would say believe in yourself. One of the pitfalls of the industry is that, people are going to tell you no and tell you you're not right for this role, or your script isn't what they're looking for. So there's a lot of rejection. And unfortunately, the same qualities that you need to succeed are also the same qualities that, would make you not give up if you're never going to succeed. So it's hard. You really have to believe in yourself. So when people tell you no, when people say, that they don't want to read your script, or people say that you're not going to book the role, you really do just have to not give up. And by the way, Robert Kamen's a good example. Robert Kamen, who, as I said, we're very friendly now. My friendship with Robert started with me meeting him in a restaurant in New York when I was telling my family I intended to drop out of school to pursue a screenwriting career. And Robert overheard that conversation and said, no, you're not. Go to school. Everyone thinks they're a writer. You're not a writer. Get a degree. Do something. I'm a writer. Okay. And let me tell you, you're never going to be a screenwriter. Go to school. So you also have to take the rejection not as, oh, this person's my enemy. Robert's one of my best friends now. And it started with him telling me that. And so, people are going to take a minute sometimes to buy into what you are trying to buy into about yourself. So I think you have to take yourself seriously. I think you have to buy into what you're trying to do. You have to work extremely hard. I do think you have to have in your mind that there's someone working even harder, and you just have to really, really go. And I think the big thing is be nice. Like that is the most underrated quality, I think, that can help. There are a lot of assholes who succeed in the business, so I don't want to diminish the success of any of the very successful assholes in the business. But if you can be a mensch, if you can be a nice person and be kind and help people who need help, if you just can do the things that are required of being a basically decent human, you will be surprised how helpful that is in terms of building a career in the business. Because at the end of the day, whether you're a feature writer, an actor, a director, a showrunner, it's all collaborative. It's all about having to work with people. And you can be the biggest genius in the world, but if you are the worst to work with, it eventually catches up to you the minute you stumble. And so you'll see a lot of people who are really successful, who everyone hates, and then the minute they have one flop, one thing, everyone throws them overboard. You want to be the guy who, when something doesn't work out, people root for, and want to get back up and keep going. So the more you can be a basically decent human being and help those you can around you in the industry, I think the more you will find you move through the business rapidly.
I think that's amazing advice. Even though you said you didn't have any profound advice, I do think that's some of the best advice.
I said, like, work hard, believe in yourself, be nice. So I don't, this is not turning into a book deal or a speaking tour for me, but I'm glad I had the opportunity to talk to everybody. And I mean, the thing I can't emphasize enough, if this is the thing you want to do, you just do it. You can't give into your own self-doubt. You can't give in to people who tell you that it's not the right path for you. I've had as much of that, I suspect, as anybody else. You just have to keep going. And then good things are certainly possible. And then one day you too might be represented by Michael Shankman.
You guys, it was great. Just popping back in here at the end, first of all, Amanda and Miguel, you guys did a fantastic job. And Jason, just really fantastic to listen to all this. You're ending it so perfectly because all your stories of persistence throughout, from the first script that you wrote and all of that is so critical. We talk about this with, the students that we work with all the time, that if you're really passionate about it, you have to just keep pushing, keep persisting. And the character thing. I mean, what you said at the very end, we talk about that too, that your character is so important. And there are plenty of jerks in the business who have been successful, but it's not the most, I think, you certainly can benefit from being a stand-up person, and your character is something that, you have with you your whole life. So it's, pretty critical.
Well, I fully believe that. I think it's an important part of building, probably in any industry, building a career in this industry in particular, where there are a lot of jerks. There's a lot of people who, will try to hurt you, try to stop. It really does matter if you're not a terrible human.
Well, I mean, sometimes people can be forgiven if there's people who are viewed as having talent, and sometimes we, will cater to people a little bit more than we probably should, because of that. But at the end of the day, it's also a workplace, and you kind of have to remember that. I love that you brought up the Sid Field book and the Vogler book. I mean, both of those were actually super formative for me early on in my career, reading to understand story structure. I highly recommend both of those books to everybody. Sid Field's The Foundations of Screenwriting is just a classic. That goes back a long way. But anybody interested in the story should read, Joseph Campbell, uh, Hero with a Thousand
It's
Faces.
9 o'clock.
Up. But so it's great that you brought that up, and students should definitely look into that. But thanks everybody for tuning in. This was, once again, really great. For those people who might have turned in after the beginning, this is a part of the Gather Project. Check out gatherproject.net and sign up for our mailing list to keep up with, the other things that we're doing. And again, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your insights with the group.
Thank you for having me. I hope that was helpful. I hope that everyone out there who's starting to build their careers in the film industry, go out and do it, and hopefully we all get to work together someday.
Sounds great. Great job, Amanda Miguel. You really fantastic. And Jason, hope we get to meet it in person sometime in LA soon.
I would love that.
Great. All right, you guys, take care, and everybody have a great night. Thank you.
Bye, gang. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.